Welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with author Alan Fadling.
Join us as we continue to explore a year of slowing down.
So on days 321 and 322, and I love the way that you have really built rest or a Sabbath into the devotional, because you have us reading only 6 a week, and we get to choose which day we read that 6th one. But you talk about a soul happy in God. And you write, it helps me to begin a day by rehearsing the joyful goodness of God rather than ruminating on what bothers, burdens, or overwhelms me. Can you describe that restful power of focusing on God versus that energy-sapping drain of focusing on our circumstances?
Yeah, so just as an illustration, the new year has begun. I caught some kind of goofy influenza during the holiday, and so I didn't get done what I hoped I'd get done. So I enter this week feeling behind. And when I feel behind, one of my knee-jerk reactions is anxiety. Oh no, I won't be ready for that speaking engagement next week. Oh no, I'm interviewing somebody tomorrow and I haven't read enough of their book yet. And I can spend an immense amount of energy and time in anxiety, and it turns out it is not very productive. That's not a shock for anybody, I know. And so this morning, for example, the temptation was jump right in on the work because there's more work than I have time to do it.
Right.
But what I have learned over time is if instead I start my day, as you said, from that entry, remembering the good I already have. Anxiety wants to worry about what I don't have. Gratitude, for example, reminds me of how much I already have, the people God's given me, the opportunities I've already been able to enjoy, the privileges that I have in my life. These are all gifts. And when I rehearse those, then I bring abundance to the work I have, even if it feels like more than I have time for. The reality is this: we all have lived many years, even decades, and our anxiety has not proven to be a wonderful counselor.
Right.
So I'm trying not to let it be my counselor now, trying instead to live and to work from places of trusted goodness and abundance instead of what anxiety projects, which is very different from that.
That's
Wow,
good.
thank you for sharing that. That was a good word.
Yes.
On day 24 of the devotional, you talk about practicing presence, and you use Psalms 24:7, which says, "One thing I ask of the Lord, this only, that I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord." And the question says at the bottom, what temptation do you have to be absent? What does that look like in your life? And how is Jesus inviting you to be more present with him, with everybody, with yourself and everyone else? And the question really encouraged me. First of all, I was kind of camping on the word dwell from the passage, but I think it's easy to start our day with the Lord. I invite him in, I sit at his feet, then I go about the day. And before I know it, I'm going solo, rogue. I'm not even really thinking. I'm not practicing his presence. And I might say a prayer before I go to bed. And I think, okay, how do I change that? My goal is to dwell and be with him all day. Would you have any word of encouragement for that?
Yeah, well, one word of encouragement is I sure don't think you're alone in that. I think a lot of us can empathize and identify. But this again maybe goes back to the idea of our lives as a practicing of the presence of God. And so, there have been times for me where my morning devotion felt like going to one room in the house, then I finish my devotional, leave that room, close the door, and go to the other room where my computer is and the desk is. Now I'm in a different room. Now, I would not say it's the room where God isn't, but in a weird way, I sort of can compartmentalize. I have this habit myself. And so that's why, for me, it's been helpful, for example, to have little transitional practices, like little moments between things. My journal is almost always open. I computer journal. I don't handwrite journal. I know some people prefer writing on paper, and that's good, great. But my journal is literally a place where I will finish a project. I'm reading a book or I'm writing a blog post, whatever, and I'll take 1 minute and go to my journal and just check in.
Mm.
Thank you, God, for the good ideas you just gave me. That was so encouraging.
Mm.
Thank you now for the chance I have to meet with this person. I know this is one of the dynamics we've been talking about. Would you give me wisdom? Will you give them grace? I can do all that in about a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But the value of that minute is it keeps me tuned in to the God I met with and began my day with. So even just those little teeny tiny transitional practices, they don't take a great deal of time, but they have a great deal of impact. And the other thing I would say is it's been helpful for me to have a way of ending my day just like I begin my day with God. And so
Mm-hmm.
one of my evening practices, kind of one of the last things before I head for bed, is I look back over the day and just ask myself, where did I see evidences of God's grace?
Mm.
Maybe some of them I noticed right in the middle of it. Maybe some of them I did not notice, but looking back, I do now notice. My wife calls me, but she calls me a pessimist. I want to call myself a realist, but she won't let me get away with that. So gratitude has been a great practice for me to assume abundance of goodness instead of my pessimism, which assumes half emptiness and, deficit and scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, just thinking out loud, but those kinds of practices along the way have helped me.
That's great. So toward the end of the devotional on day 362, you talk about the Lord is not slow. And that's just been one of my favorite verses. The Lord is not slow as some would count slow, but patient. And it's a really, really powerful word, what you wrote in the devotional. But for me, sometimes in my humanness, slowing down can feel like I'm going in slow motion, or it feels like I'm getting out of sync with the world. And then that pesky little FOMO, fear of missing out, starts creeping into my mind. Oh no, what might I be missing? And I know that that's just absolutely not the way that we need to be living. And you actually describe God's slowness as gracious and positive and powerful. So can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So one thought that comes to mind is, we're living in a very technologically sophisticated era. Now, part of that tempts us to see ourselves as machines. We're
Mm-hmm.
tempted to see ourselves as computers, like we can run 24/7. We are much more like the trees and the birds and the other living things in our backyards and in our towns than we are like those computers.
Mm.
But even our metaphors and our languages, we sort of are assuming that we can function just like a computer can.
Mm.
But that's not how we are most productive. Try to compute love.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how, that doesn't work that way. So
Right.
what's helped me is to realize that hurried appears to get more done, but often all that gets done at the end of a day or a week or a month, you look back and wonder, did that matter? I mean, I checked a lot of boxes. It was really impressive box checking. But maybe the things I care most about, the things God's inviting me into most, maybe those got shortchanged in my hurry.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to live according to the great command, for example, this is where, love is patient, love is slow, I would say. Most of the fruits of the Spirit do not operate well in a hurry.
Right.
If you just kind of think through the 9 of them, they really are unhurried virtues.
That is true.
Well, if that's true, then living my life and even doing my work a little less frantically, anxiously, hurriedly may actually, in the long run, produce better fruit, even if it doesn't check as many boxes as my hurried way does.
Yeah. I feel like we've touched upon it, but as our time is coming to a close, is there anything else about rest that you might want to share with us? We were just saying before we hopped on the interview today, how when you talk with other women, we talk with young ladies that we study with, they will say, I just have so much going on. I'm so stressed out. I can't do it. And we know there's a better way. And we also know that there's seasons that are really full. So how with activity, right? And you can't, running someone here, doing this, or, things that even crop up. So what advice would you give us? And maybe we could even just impart that to other people and to ourselves, but when we talk with them.
Yeah. Well, so one, you're exactly right. You know, I'm in my 60s. I have adult sons. I am not in the same era as when we had three little guys under
Right.
10,
Right.
or three teenage boys with all of their activities. So I understand that, and I need to acknowledge that. But one of the things I appreciate, you use the language of seasons. There is a reality of seasons, and we have to, it's best if we give ourselves grace in the various seasons in which we find ourselves. Alongside that, what I want to say is, in every season of life, God is extending the invitation to rest.
Mm.
So what it looks like for a young mom with little kids to rest, it'll look different than somebody in their 60s like me, who's in a different season of life. What I will say to you is that every season of life is also the temptation. There's a temptation to be restless,
Mhm.
to postpone rest. I can't rest now. I'll rest in the next season.
Yes.
But when you get to the next season has its own temptations. So,
Mhm.
for example, not to go too far down this path, but the reason many retired people struggle to rest is they never learned how to before they retired.
Mm.
They think retirement is a magic answer to resting. It isn't. If your habit has been restless till you get into your 60s, you'll be a restless retired person.
Mm.
So what I want to say to people is, figure out what God's invitation to rest is right now, where you find yourself. God is inviting you to it. It is not an escape from responsibility. It is not an avoidance of what God's giving you. It is something God is giving you. And this maybe goes back to why I think it's important to value rest as a gift, just as we value work as a gift.
You're reminding me of a time in my life, and I've spoken of it often, as Sue and I have shared, about a time where I was having an extremely taxing, hard season with one of our children. And I remember him going off to school, and I literally just cried out, "What do you want me to do? I don't know what to do." And literally, the very next thought in my head was, trust in me with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge me. That was God's invitation. Linda, I'm asking you to rest. Just rest.
Yes, it
Rest
is.
in me. Stop striving. Stop doing. Get that peace. So thank you for putting much better words to it than I ever
No,
have.
you said it very well. That connecting rest and trust is an important connection to make.
Okay.
Yeah, that's so true. Very, very true. Yes.
Right.
So a year of slowing down, you've already alluded to it a little bit, but I'd love to be able to talk about it a little bit more. It's not your only project, and it's not your most recent project, actually. So can you just share with us what your other writing projects have been, including the one that you will be debuting on February 6th?
Sure. Well, so A Year of Slowing Down was the third of a trilogy on the theme of hurry. So Unhurried Life, Unhurried Leader. Those first two books, by the way, some people think Unhurried Life, that's for everybody. Unhurried Leader, that's for a select few who have jobs that are leaders. No, those two books really are a pair of books.
Okay.
They both talk about my inner life with God, my outer life in relationship and work and otherwise. So both of those books are for anyone. And then The Year of Slowing Down, of course, as I said, is sort of an opportunity to turn this into a formational journey. In the middle of that, my wife and I wrote a book called What Does Your Soul Love? It was our attempt to answer the question, how do you help people keep growing throughout their lifetime? Sometimes it feels like we've been very good at helping people meet Jesus, grow in their early stages with Jesus, become servants of Jesus in ministry. But then as they get to more challenging places later on, we don't always know how to help them there. So that book was an attempt to help people keep growing through the various stages and seasons of their lives. And then, so those are the four. In February here this year, I will release my fifth book, which is titled A Non-Anxious Life. And it is the most personal book I've written. It was the most difficult book I wrote. Dallas Willard once said, anything you could do in anxiety, you could just do a lot better in peace. And I remember the first time I heard him say that, I mean, it sounded so good, but something in my soul said, I don't know if I buy it. I'm not sure if I'll get anything done if I don't have my anxiety. I mean, it has driven me for so long. It drove me to big activity, high standards, all of that. And so in many ways, this book was an attempt to see, was Dallas right? Therefore, is Jesus right about my anxiety, that it won't add an inch to my stature, a moment to my lifespan. It doesn't improve anything. If anything, it creates challenges for me. And so peace is more creative. It is more wise than anxiety will ever be. So that book comes out in about a month from our conversation now, anyway. And I'm really looking forward to it being out. I think it speaks to an issue that a lot of us are wrestling with in this season.
Are people able to pre-order it at this point?
Yeah, anywhere you buy books, most everybody has a pre-order button there. Amazon certainly does.
Nice. Okay.
Wow. Well, we'll have to have you back, Alan, to talk about that book. That's
Yes.
wonderful.
That'd be fun.
Thank you so much for your time today and helping us kick off our month of rest as we talk with our viewers about rest. And we're excited to have your wife join us next Monday as we talk about
I'm glad.
soul care. So we cannot wait to meet her as well.
Yeah.
What is the best way for our audience to find you? How would they find you?
Yeah. Well, the simplest would be to go to our website, which is unhurriedliving.com. I'm not super active on social media, but I do have a presence on LinkedIn more so than the other platforms. So that'd be a place someone could reach to me too.
Wonderful.
Nice.
Thank you.
So we are so grateful to you today for letting us invite you to the table and to talk with us. And friends, we're also really excited always to invite you to the conversational table too. And we're praying that the month of January will kick off a year where you really walk in greater rest, because we know that greater rest leads to days that are sublime
and more free above the fray. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next Monday. Thank you.